The metal floor was cold against Lee Taeho's face as the alien guards dragged him down the long corridor. His hands were tied behind his back with some kind of energy rope that burned his skin whenever he tried to move. The walls around them glowed with a strange blue light that hurt his eyes. "Keep moving, soft thing," one of the guards growled in broken human language. The creature stood over 7 feet tall with gray skin like stone and 4 arms that ended in sharp claws. Its voice sounded like grinding rocks. Behind Taeho, he could hear his 2 companions being dragged along as well. Park So-jin was trying not to cry, but he could hear her breathing heavily. Kim Woo-bin had stopped making noise an hour ago after the guards hit him too many times. Taeho closed his eyes and tried to remember how they had ended up here. 3 days ago, they had been on Drakmor Prime studying the ancient caves where dragons used to live. Taeho was a scientist who spent his life learning about dragons from different worlds. So-jin was an engineer who built homes for animals that were almost gone forever. Woo-bin was a soldier sent to protect them. The mission had been going well. They found cave paintings that showed humans and dragons living together thousands of years ago. Taeho was excited because no one had ever seen proof that humans and dragons had been friends before. Then the ships came. The Kethmori ships appeared in the sky like dark clouds. These aliens were known across the galaxy as warriors, who took what they wanted. They captured other species and used them for work or entertainment. Humans were new to them, but they had heard stories about the small, weak creatures from Earth. Woo-bin had tried to fight them off while So-jin and Taeho ran to their ship. But there were too many aliens, and their weapons were too strong. Within minutes, all 3 humans were on the ground with energy nets wrapped around them. Now they were being taken somewhere inside a massive alien ship. The corridor seemed to go on forever, with doors leading to other passages. Strange sounds came from behind some of the doors, screaming, roaring, and other noises that made Taeho's stomach feel sick. "Where are you taking us?" So-jin asked, her voice shaking. The guard closest to her stopped and turned around. Its face had no nose, just 2 holes where the nose should be. Its mouth was full of sharp teeth like a shark. "You go to processing human female, then you make entertainment for us." The creature laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Your kind is so soft, so weak. You will make good sport." Taeho knew what that meant. He had heard stories from other captured species. The Kethmori had arenas where they made prisoners fight dangerous creatures for fun. Most prisoners died within days. They reached a large room with bright white lights that made everything look clean and medical. Several more Kethmori were waiting there, wearing different clothes than the guards. These ones had symbols on their uniforms that probably meant they were doctors or scientists. The guards threw the 3 humans onto metal tables. Taeho's shoulder hit the cold surface hard and pain shot down his arm. Machines came down from the ceiling and started scanning their bodies with red beams of light. "Interesting," said one of the alien doctors. This one was smaller than the guards but had the same gray skin. "These creatures are even weaker than the report said. Look at this skin. So thin you can see the blood underneath." Another doctor picked up Taeho's hand and examined his fingers. No claws, no natural weapons at all. How did this species survive on their homeworld? "Maybe they had no predators," the first doctor said. "Some worlds are like that. Soft worlds make soft creatures." Taeho wanted to tell them they were wrong. Humans had survived ice ages, wars, diseases, and disasters that would have killed most species. But his mouth was too dry to speak, and he knew they would not listen anyway. The scanning finished, and the doctors made notes on their devices. Then new guards came in, these ones wearing black uniforms instead of brown. Their leader had scars across his face and more symbols on his clothes. "I am Vexistar," the scarred alien said, looking down at the 3 humans. "I am warden of this facility. You are now my property." Vexitar walked around the table where Taeho was lying. His 4 eyes studied the human like he was looking at an interesting bug. "We have heard about your species, humans. You come from a world with only 1 star and weak gravity. You have no natural defenses, no armor, no claws or teeth worth mentioning. Yet somehow you have built ships that can travel between stars." The warden leaned closer to Taeho. His breath smelled like rotting meat. "This makes you curious to us. We want to see how long you can survive against real predators. You will provide entertainment for our people." So Jin made a small crying sound. Wu Bin, who had been unconscious, started to wake up and groaned in pain. "Please," Taeho managed to say. "We are scientists. We were only studying old ruins. We have families waiting for us." Vextar laughed, the same glass-breaking sound as the other guards. "All prisoners say such things. It does not matter. What matters is how much fun you will provide before you die." The warden turned to his guards. "Take them to cell block 7. Give them the standard food and water. We want them healthy for the games." As the guards picked them up again, Taeho heard something that made his scientist brain pay attention. From somewhere deep in the ship came a sound like thunder, but longer and more musical. It happened again, then again, like a pattern. "What was that sound?" he asked one of the guards. "The dragons," the guard said with a cruel smile. "They are hungry. Soon you will meet them." Dragons. Real dragons, not just the bones and paintings he had studied his whole life. Despite everything that had happened, despite being captured and facing death, Taeho felt a spark of excitement. He had spent years learning about these creatures from old stories and ancient remains. Now he might actually see living dragons. The guards dragged them through more corridors until they reached a row of small rooms with energy barriers instead of doors. Each cell was just big enough for one person to lie down. The floor was hard metal, and there was no furniture except a small hole in one corner that was probably meant to be a bathroom. They threw Taeho into the first cell, Sojin into the second, and Wubin into the third. The energy barriers buzzed to life, trapping them inside. "Rest well, soft ones," Vextar said. "Tomorrow the real entertainment begins." As the aliens walked away, their footsteps echoing in the corridor, Taeho sat on the cold floor and tried to think. He could hear Sojin crying softly in the next cell, and Wubin mumbling as he tried to understand where they were. The thunderous sound came again from somewhere below them. It was definitely dragons, and they sounded big. Taeho had studied dragon calls from recordings found on dead worlds. These calls were deeper and more complex than anything in his research. He closed his eyes and tried to remember everything. He knew about dragons. Every story, every legend, every piece of scientific data he had collected over the years. If he was going to face these creatures, he needed to understand them. The sound came once more, and this time it almost seemed like the dragons were talking to each other. Taeho pressed his ear to the floor, listening carefully. There was a pattern, a rhythm that reminded him of language. Maybe, just maybe, these dragons were smarter than the aliens realized. Taeho woke up to the sound of screaming. His body ached from sleeping on the hard metal floor, and his mouth felt like sand. The screaming came from somewhere far below, followed by a thunderous roar that made the walls shake. "So, Jin," he whispered, toward the next cell. "Are you awake?" "I never slept," came her quiet reply. "Wubin has been unconscious all night. I think they hurt him badly." Through the energy barrier of his cell, Taeho could see other prisoners in cells across the corridor. Most of them were aliens he did not recognize, but they all had the same look of fear and defeat. Some had been here so long they just stared at nothing. A guard appeared with a tray of food. The creature pushed the tray through a slot in the energy barrier. The food looked like gray paste with chunks of something. That might have been meat. It smelled terrible, but Taeho's stomach was so empty he ate it anyway. "What happens here?" Taeho asked the guard. The alien looked surprised that a prisoner would speak to him. "You fight. You die. You make crowd happy." He laughed, his glass-breaking laugh. "Sometimes you live one day. Sometimes you live 2 days if you run fast." "What do we fight?" "Different things. Depends what Vextar wants to see. Yesterday we had tiny green ones from Sector 9. They lasted maybe 10 minutes against the sand wolves." The guard seemed to enjoy remembering this. "But today is special day. Today we test the dragons." The guard walked away, but his words stayed in Taeho's mind. Test the dragons. What did that mean? Hours passed. More screaming came from below, sometimes lasting for minutes before stopping suddenly. Each time the dragon sounds got louder and more angry. Taeho pressed his ear to the floor again, trying to understand what the dragons were saying to each other. The calls were definitely Language. There were short calls that seemed like questions and longer calls that sounded like answers. Sometimes multiple dragons would call at the same time, like they were arguing about something. "They are talking," Taeho said to Sojin. "What?" "The dragons. They are not just making noise, they are talking to each other like we do." Sojin was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure? I have studied dragon sounds my whole life. These calls have patterns, grammar. They are having conversations down there." Around midday, Vextar came to visit with several other aliens wearing fancy clothes. These must be important people, maybe. The ones who paid to watch the entertainment. "Here are our new additions," Vextar said, pointing at the three humans. "The species that calls itself Homo sapiens, from a world called Earth." One of the visitors, an alien with golden skin and 6 arms, looked closely at Taeho. "They are smaller than I expected. Do they have any special abilities?" "None that we can detect," Vextar replied. "No claws, no armor, no poison, no enhanced strength. They are completely defenseless." "Then why did you waste space bringing them here?" asked another visitor, this one with purple scales covering its body. Vextar smiled his cruel smile. "Because sometimes the most entertaining fights are when the outcome is obvious. The crowd loves to see overconfidence destroyed. These humans think they are smart because they can build ships. Wait until they meet real predators." The golden alien nodded. "When do we see them perform?" "Today. I am sending this one to the dragon pit first." Vextar pointed directly at Taeho. "The dragons have been restless lately. They need to remember who controls them." Taeho felt his heart start beating fast. Today. He was going to face the dragons today. After the visitors left, Vextar stayed. Behind an open Taeho's cell, 4 guards surrounded him immediately. "Time for your performance, human," the warden said. "Try to make it interesting. The crowd gets angry when fights end too quickly." They put new energy restraints on Taeho's hands and started walking him through the ship. The corridors here were different, wider and taller, with viewing windows that looked down into large rooms. In one room, he saw creatures that looked like giant insects fighting each other while aliens watched from above and cheered. "Your species fascinates me," Vextar said as they walked. "You have no natural weapons, yet you conquered your own world. How did you do it?" Taeho thought about this question. How could he explain human history to this creature who only understood strength and violence? "We learned to work together," he said finally. "We used tools. We adapted." "Tools," Vextar laughed. "Yes, we have seen your tools. Impressive for such a weak species. But tools cannot help you in the arena. There you face nature with only what your body can do." They reached a large elevator that took them down several levels. The dragon sounds were much louder here, and Taeho could feel vibrations in the floor from their movements. His scientific mind was excited despite his fear. He was about to see living dragons. The elevator opened into a preparation room with racks of weapons and armor, but Vextar walked past all of it. "No weapons for you, human. We want to see what you can do with nothing but your natural abilities." Through a large window, Taeho could see the arena. It was huge, carved from black stone with seating for hundreds of aliens rising up on all sides. At the center was a deep pit, maybe 50 feet across. The walls of the pit were smooth stone that would be impossible to climb, and in the pit were the dragons. Taeho pressed his face against the window to get a better look. There were 3 of them, and they were beautiful. Each was about 30 feet long with scales that seemed to glow with their own light. One had deep red scales like jewels, another was golden like the sun, and the third was silver like starlight. But as Taeho watched, he realized something was wrong. The dragons moved slowly, like they were tired or sick. They had collars around their necks that sparked with electricity. Around the pit were devices that probably delivered shocks to keep the dragons under control. "Magnificent, are they not?" Vextar said. "We captured them from their dying homeworld 50 years ago. They were the last of their kind there." "You are torturing them," Taeho said quietly. "We are controlling them. Dragons are powerful and dangerous. Without proper discipline, they would kill everyone. Vextar gestured to the control devices. Those collars ensure they behave properly during shows. The arena was filling with aliens now. Hundreds of creatures from different species, all here to watch Tae-ho die for their entertainment. Their voices created a noise like buzzing insects. "It is time," Vextar said. The guards pushed Tae-ho toward a door that led directly to the arena floor. His hands were still tied and his legs felt weak with fear, but part of his mind was still working like a scientist, observing and analyzing. The dragons had not attacked each other even though they were trapped together. That suggested they were intelligent enough to understand their situation. The way they moved showed they were conserving energy, probably waiting for an opportunity. And the calls he had heard earlier. If the dragons could communicate with each other, maybe they could understand other forms of communication too. The door opened and Tae-ho stepped onto the arena floor. The crowd noise became deafening. Above him, aliens were cheering and making bets on how quickly he would die. Another door opened across the arena leading to the dragon pit. A ramp extended from the pit to the main floor. The dragons would be released in moments. Tae-ho walked slowly toward the center of the arena. His scientific training had taught him to observe carefully before acting. The dragons were watching him through the opening to their pit. Their eyes were large and intelligent, not the mindless stare of simple beasts. The red dragon tilted its head, studying him. The golden one made a soft sound, almost like a question. The silver dragon moved closer to the ramp, but not in an aggressive way. A horn sounded and the gates to the dragon pit opened completely. The crowd went wild, expecting to see Tae-ho torn apart within seconds. But the dragons did not charge. They walked slowly up the ramp and onto the arena floor, still watching Tae-ho carefully. The red dragon, who seemed to be their leader, approached first. Tae-ho stood very still. Everything he had ever learned about dragons told him that sudden movements would trigger their hunting instincts. Instead, he tried to remember the ancient stories about how humans and dragons had once been allies. The red dragon stopped just a few feet away. This close, Tae-ho could see that its scales were not just red, but had patterns of gold and orange that shifted in the light. The creature was even more beautiful than he had imagined, and its eyes. They were ancient and wise, like they had seen the birth and death of stars. The dragon made a sound, low and musical. Not a roar of anger, but something that sounded almost like greeting. Tae-ho took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. Tae-ho slowly lifted his bound hands and turned his palms toward the ground. It was an old gesture he had read about in ancient human texts, a sign of respect that meant he came in peace. He had no idea if dragons from other worlds would understand it, but it was worth trying. The red dragon stopped moving and tilted its massive head. The golden dragon made a soft humming sound. The silver one stepped closer, its eyes never leaving Tae-ho's face. The crowd above began to get restless. They wanted to see blood and violence, not this strange, quiet meeting. Some aliens started shouting for the dragons to attack. "What is happening?" Vextar's voice came through speakers around the arena. "Dragons, destroy the human now." But the dragons ignored the warden's command. The red dragon, who was clearly the eldest, moved even closer to Tae-ho. The creature was so large that its head was almost as big as Tae-ho's entire body. One bite could end everything. Instead, the dragon did something that made the entire arena fall silent. It lowered its great head until its snout was just inches from Tae-ho's outstretched hands. Then very gently it touched its nose to Tae-ho's palm. The touch was warm and dry, not cold like Tae-ho had expected. He could feel the dragon's breath against his skin. More importantly, he could sense something else: intelligence, wisdom, and something that felt almost like recognition. The golden dragon approached next. This one was smaller and seemed younger than the red one. It repeated the same gesture, touching its snout to Tae-ho's other palm. Its scales were warm like sunlight. Finally, the silver dragon came forward. This one was the largest of the three, with scars across its neck from the control collar. When it touched Tae-ho's hand, he felt a vibration through its scales, like a cat purring but much deeper. Then, All three dragons did something that shocked everyone in the arena. They lowered their heads in what could only be described as a bow. The crowd went completely silent. Even the guards stopped moving. No one had ever seen dragons bow to anyone, especially not to a human. Vextar's voice cracked with rage over the speakers. This is impossible. Dragons do not bow, they are beasts, animals. They follow commands or they receive punishment. The red dragon lifted its head and looked directly at the warden's viewing box. It made a sound that was clearly angry, a low rumble that made the arena floor vibrate. The message was clear even without words. The dragon did not like being called an animal. Tejo was amazed. His years of studying dragon behavior had taught him to look for signs of intelligence, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. These creatures understood not just language but insults. The golden dragon moved to stand beside Tejo, positioning itself between him and the arena walls. The silver dragon did the same on his other side. The red dragon remained in front of him. They were protecting him. "Guards!" Vextar screamed. "Activate the control collars. Maximum power." Electricity sparked from the collars around the dragon's necks. All three creatures roared in pain and anger, but they did not move away from Tejo. They endured the torture rather than abandon him. Tejo felt sick watching them suffer because of him. "Stop!" he shouted toward Vextar's box. "You are hurting them for nothing. They are not attacking anyone." "They must obey," Vextar replied. "Dragons are tools of war. They exist to fight and kill on command." The red dragon turned its head toward Tejo and made a series of complex sounds. The rhythm and tone reminded him of human speech, but deeper and more musical. The other two dragons answered with their own sounds. Tejo listened carefully. The patterns were similar to what he had heard through his cell floor, but more urgent. They were definitely communicating about something important. The golden dragon stepped forward and made a gesture with its head toward the arena walls. Then it looked at Tejo and made a questioning sound. The meaning seemed clear. It was asking if he understood something. Tejo looked where the dragon had indicated. The walls were solid stone with no obvious weakness. But as he studied them more carefully, he noticed something. Some of the stones were a different color, like they had been repaired or replaced. The silver dragon made its own gesture, pointing with its snout toward the ceiling where the control devices were mounted. It made the same questioning sound as the golden dragon. They were not just talking to each other. They were trying to talk to him. Tejo's mind raced. If the dragons could communicate, if they understood their situation, then they probably had ideas about how to escape. The different colored stones in the wall might mark weak points. The control devices on the ceiling were the source of their torture. "You want to get out of here," he said quietly to the red dragon. "You have been planning something." The red dragon made a soft sound that seemed like agreement. It moved its head in what looked almost like a nod. The crowd was getting angry now. They had paid to see a human torn apart, not to watch dragons and their prey having a conversation. Aliens began throwing things into the arena and shouting demands for action. Vextar appeared at the edge of his viewing box. "Enough of this circus. Guards, prepare the flame units. If the dragons will not kill the human, we will kill them all and find new entertainment." New panels opened in the arena walls, revealing weapons designed to shoot fire. These were meant to force the dragons to fight by threatening them with death if they did not perform. The dragons saw the weapons and their postures changed immediately. The red dragon spread its wings, making itself look larger and more threatening. The golden and silver dragons moved closer to Tejo, forming a protective circle around him. But they did not prepare to attack the weapons or try to escape. Instead, they looked at Tejo expectantly, as if waiting for him to make a decision. Tejo realized something incredible. The dragons were not just protecting him. They were waiting for his leadership. They had recognized something in him that made them willing to follow his guidance. The ancient stories came back to him. Tales of humans and dragons working together as partners, not as master and servant. The dragons had not bowed to him as their ruler. They had bowed to him as someone they could trust. "You think I can help you?" he said to the red dragon. "You have been waiting for someone who would understand that you are not animals." The red dragon made another soft sound of agreement. The flame units were powering up now, glowing red hot as they prepared to fire. In seconds, the arena would become a furnace designed to force the dragons to fight or die. Tae-ho looked at his three new allies. They were magnificent creatures, with intelligence that rivaled any species he had ever encountered. They did not deserve to be tortured for entertainment. "Can you break these restraints on my hands?" he asked the red dragon. The dragon understood immediately. It moved its head down and used one of its claws to carefully cut through the energy bonds. Taeho's hands were free for the first time since his capture. "Now," he said, looking at all three dragons, "let us show these aliens what happens when humans and dragons work together." The red dragon's eyes seemed to gleam with anticipation. It made a sound to the other two that was clearly a command. All three dragons turned to face the walls of the arena, no longer looking like captive beasts. They looked like warriors preparing for battle. The flame units fired with a roar like thunder. Streams of burning liquid shot across the arena, creating walls of fire meant to drive the dragons into a frenzy. But instead of panicking, the three dragons moved with perfect coordination. The silver dragon spread its wings wide, creating a shield that protected Tae-ho from the flames. The golden dragon crouched low and began making a strange humming sound that seemed to vibrate through the arena floor. The red dragon raised its head and let out a call that was different from any sound Tae-ho had heard before. Something incredible happened. The electrical systems around the arena began to flicker and spark. The flame unit stuttered and went out. Even the lights in the viewing boxes dimmed. "The golden one," Tae-ho whispered in amazement. "It is doing something to the electricity." The golden dragon looked back at him and made a sound that seemed pleased. Then it touched one claw to the stone floor. Sparks ran along the ground, and more systems failed throughout the arena. Vextar's voice came over the speakers, but it was distorted now by electrical interference. "What is happening? Guards, get down there and restore order." The red dragon moved close to Tae-ho and made a series of complex sounds. The meaning was not clear, but the tone seemed urgent. It was trying to tell him something important. Tae-ho looked around the arena, studying everything with new eyes. The dragons had been planning this for a long time. The golden dragon could somehow control electrical systems. The silver dragon was strong enough to shield them from weapons. The red dragon seemed to be their leader and strategist. "You have been waiting for someone like me," he said. "Someone who could help you coordinate with the other prisoners." The red dragon made a sound of agreement. Then it did something that proved just how intelligent it really was. Using its claw, it began drawing in the sand that covered the arena floor. The drawing was rough, but Tae-ho could see what it meant. It showed the layout of the prison ship. The arena was here, the cell blocks were above, and there were other areas the dragon had somehow learned about. The silver dragon added its own marks to the drawing. These showed where guards were usually stationed. The golden dragon drew lines that probably represented electrical systems and power sources. "You have been mapping this place," Tae-ho realized. "You know how to get out." More guards were coming, down to the arena now, carrying weapons designed to hurt dragons. But the creatures did not seem worried. The red dragon made another series of sounds to its companions, and they began to move. The golden dragon placed both front claws on the ground and made its humming sound again. This time the effect was much stronger. All the lights went out, plunging the arena into darkness. Emergency lighting came on a few seconds later, but it was much dimmer. In the confusion, the silver dragon moved to the arena wall where the different colored stones were. It struck the wall with its powerful claws, and an entire section crumbled away, revealing a maintenance tunnel behind it. "The weak points," Tae-ho said. "You found all the weak points in this place." The red dragon moved to his side and made a gentle sound, then gestured toward the tunnel with its head. The message was clear. It was time to go. But Tae-ho hesitated. "My friends are still in the cell blocks. So-jin and Woo-bin, I cannot leave them." The red dragon tilted its head considering this. Then it made sounds to the other two dragons. They seemed to be discussing something. The golden dragon approached Tae-ho and made a questioning sound while pointing toward the ceiling with its snout. When Tae-ho looked up, he could see ventilation grates that probably connected to other parts of the ship. "You can get to the cell blocks through the air systems," he understood. But you want to know if it is worth the risk. The dragons waited for his answer. They had accepted him as their partner, but they wanted him to make the choice about whether to attempt a rescue. Taeho thought about Sojin, who had always tried to help animals that could not help themselves, and Woo-bin, who had fought to protect them, even when the odds were hopeless. They were his friends and his responsibility. Yes, he said firmly. We get them out. All of us leave together or none of us leave. The red dragon made a sound that seemed approving. It drew more lines in the sand, showing a route through the maintenance tunnels that would lead to the cell blocks. The plan was complex but possible. Guards were entering the arena now, but they moved slowly because of the darkness. Their weapons had lights, but the beams did not reach very far in the large space. The silver dragon positioned itself to block the guards' view while Taeho and the others moved toward the tunnel. Its massive body created a wall that hid their escape route. There, one of the guards shouted. I see movement. They fired their weapons at the silver dragon. The energy beams struck its scales but seemed to cause no real damage. The dragon roared, not in pain, but in anger at being attacked. Taeho crawled into the maintenance tunnel with the red and golden dragons following behind him. The tunnel was just barely large enough for the dragons to squeeze through, but they managed it. Behind them, the silver dragon continued to fight the guards, buying them time to escape. Its roars echoed through the tunnel, along with the sounds of weapons fire and shouting aliens. The tunnel was dark and narrow, filled with pipes and cables that carried power and water throughout the ship. The golden dragon's scales glowed faintly, providing just enough light to see where they were going. After several minutes of crawling, they reached a junction where the tunnel split into 3 directions. The red dragon studied the options carefully, then chose the path that led upward. They climbed for what felt like hours. Taeho's hands and knees were scraped raw from the rough metal surfaces. The dragons had an easier time because their scales protected them, but they were patient with his slower progress. Finally, they reached another junction with a grate that looked down into a corridor. Taeho recognized it immediately. It was the cell block where he and his friends were being held. The golden dragon placed its claws on the grate and sent electrical pulses through the metal. The locking mechanism sparked and failed, and the grate swung open. They dropped down into the corridor one by one. The area seemed empty of guards, probably because they were all dealing with the chaos in the arena. Sojin, Taeho called quietly toward his friend's cell. Woo-bin, are you there? Taeho. Sojin's voice came back immediately. What is happening? We heard explosions and roaring. I am getting you out of here, both of you. But you need to trust me and stay calm when you see what is with me. The red dragon moved to Sojin's cell and examined the energy barrier. It made a questioning sound to the golden dragon, who approached and touched the control panel with one claw. The barrier flickered and disappeared. Sojin stepped out of her cell and froze when she saw the dragons. Her eyes went wide, but she did not scream or run. Her scientific training took over and she studied the creatures with professional curiosity. They are beautiful, she whispered. The golden dragon seemed pleased by this reaction. It made a soft, almost purring sound and moved closer to Sojin. She hesitantly reached out and touched its golden scales. How is this possible? She asked Taeho. They are intelligent. More intelligent than the aliens realize. They have been planning an escape, and they decided to trust us to help them. They freed Woo-bin next. The soldier was still weak from his injuries, but he was alert enough to understand the situation quickly. When he saw the dragons, his first instinct was to look for weapons. They are on our side, Taeho explained. They are our allies, not our enemies. Woo-bin studied the dragons carefully, then nodded. If you trust them, I trust them. But we need to move fast. This place will be crawling with guards soon. As if responding to his words, alarm sounds began echoing through the ship. Vextar's voice came over the communication system, distorted by the electrical damage the golden dragon had caused. All units to emergency stations. The prisoners have escaped. The dragons are out of control. Use maximum force to recapture or eliminate all targets. The red dragon made urgent sounds to its companion, who was still in the arena fighting the guards. The response came back immediately, a roar that shook the walls around them. "The Silver One is telling us to hurry," Tejo interpreted. "It cannot hold the guards off much longer." They moved quickly through the corridors with the dragons leading the way. The creatures seemed to know the layout of the ship better than the guards did. They avoided patrols and found routes that bypassed the main security checkpoints. But, as they got closer to the hangar bays where the escape pods were located, the resistance grew stronger. Groups of armed guards began appearing more frequently, and the corridors became more heavily defended. "We need the Silver Dragon," Wu Bin said, as they hid from another patrol. "We cannot fight our way through all these guards with just 2 dragons." The Red Dragon seemed to agree. It made a series of calls that carried through the ship's ventilation system. Somewhere in the distance, they heard an answering roar. Minutes later, the Silver Dragon came crashing through a wall nearby, covered in scorch marks from weapons fire, but still strong and angry. It made sounds that seemed like it was reporting on the situation behind them. "Now we are all together," Tejo said. "Now we can really fight back." The dragons formed a protective formation around the 3 humans. The Red Drago. The corridor ahead was filled with guards waiting for them. At least 20 Kethmori soldiers stood behind energy barriers, their weapons aimed toward the approaching group. Behind them, more guards were setting up heavy weapons designed to kill dragons. "They are ready for us," Wu Bin said, checking around the corner. "Too many to fight through." But Tejo was learning to think like his dragon allies. "We do not fight through them. We go around them." The Red Dragon made an approving sound. It touched its claw to the wall beside them, and Tejo noticed that this section was made of the same different-colored stone they had seen in the arena, another weak point that the dragons had identified during their years of captivity. The Silver Dragon moved into position and struck the wall with tremendous force. The impact created cracks that spread quickly through the stone. A second strike brought down an entire section, revealing another maintenance area behind it. The sound of the wall collapsing brought guards running, but by the time they arrived, the escape group had already moved into the new passage. They were now behind the defensive line, approaching the guards from an unexpected direction. "Split up," Tejo suggested. "So Jin, you go with the Golden Dragon and disable their electrical systems. Wu Bin, you and the Silver Dragon hit them, from the left. The Red Dragon and I will create a distraction from the front." It felt strange giving orders to creatures as intelligent as the dragons, but they seemed to understand his tactical thinking. The Red Dragon made sounds to its companions and they separated to execute the plan. Tejo and the Red Dragon approached the guards head-on. The aliens were confused because their enemies were supposed to be trapped in the corridor ahead, not approaching from behind. "There," one of the guards shouted. "The human and the Red Dragon." They turned their weapons toward Tejo and the Red Dragon, but that was exactly what the plan called for. While they were focused on the obvious threat, the Golden Dragon reached the power systems that controlled their energy barriers and weapons. So Jin watched as the Golden Dragon placed both claws on a control panel and sent electrical pulses through the entire system. Sparks flew from the weapons and the energy barriers flickered and failed. At the same moment, Wu Bin and the Silver Dragon attacked from the left side. The soldier had found a weapon dropped by a guard during the earlier fighting, and he used it to provide covering fire while the Silver Dragon charged into the confused group of aliens. The guards had trained to fight dragons one at a time in controlled arena conditions. They had no experience dealing with coordinated attacks by multiple dragons working with human allies. Their formation collapsed in minutes. Some of the guards tried to retreat, but the Red Dragon moved to block their escape route. It did not kill them, but it made it clear they would not be allowed to raise alarms or call for reinforcements. "The hangar bay is just ahead," Wu Bin said, studying a map display on one of the disabled control panels. "But there will be more guards there, and they will have bigger weapons." The Golden Dragon approached So Jin and made questioning sounds while looking at the control panel she was examining. She realized it was asking for her help with something. "I think it wants me to help it understand the ship's computer systems," she told Tejo. "My engineering background might be useful for more than just basic electrical work." So Jin studied the alien interface carefully. The symbols were unfamiliar, But the basic logic of computer systems was universal. After a few minutes, she found what she was looking for. "I can access the ship's internal communication system," she announced. "And I think I can broadcast to other parts of the vessel." "What are you thinking?" Taeho asked. "There are other prisoners on this ship, aliens from dozens of different species. If we can tell them what is happening, some of them might join our escape attempt." The red dragon made sounds that seemed excited by this idea. It moved closer to the communication panel and began making the complex calls that Taeho had first heard through his cell floor. "You want to talk to the other prisoners," Taeho understood, "but they will not understand dragon language." Sojin smiled. "Maybe I can help with that too. This system has translation capabilities for all the species they keep here. If the dragons can teach me a few key phrases, I can broadcast them in multiple languages." Working together, Sojin and the Golden Dragon managed to activate the ship-wide communication system. The Red Dragon taught her sounds that meant freedom, escape, and together. She programmed the computer to translate these concepts into dozens of alien languages. Her voice echoed through the entire prison ship, but in whatever language each prisoner understood best. "This is Park Sojin, speaking for the escaped prisoners. The dragons are free and they are helping us escape. Anyone who wants freedom should fight back now. Disable your cell locks. Overpower your guards. We are taking this ship." The response was immediate. Throughout the vessel, prisoners who had given up hope suddenly found new determination. Cell blocks erupted into chaos as dozens of different species began their own escape attempts. Vextar's voice came over the speakers, distorted and angry. "Ignore the humans' lies. Return to your cells immediately or face execution." But it was too late. The uprising had begun, and it was spreading faster than the guards could contain it. "Now we go to the hangar," Taeho said, "while they are dealing with revolts all over the ship." They moved quickly through corridors that were now filled with the sounds of fighting. Some prisoners had weapons they had taken from guards. Others were using their natural abilities or the environment itself as weapons. The ship that had once run on perfect order was now in complete chaos. The hangar bay was heavily defended, as Wubin had predicted. But most of the guards were being called away to deal with emergencies in other sections. Only a skeleton crew remained to protect the escape pods and small ships. 12 guards, Wubin reported after scouting ahead. 4 heavy weapons. 2 of them are operating some kind of barrier generator that blocks access to the ships. The Silver Dragon studied the defensive setup and made strategic sounds to its companions. All 3 dragons seemed to agree on a plan. "They want us to wait here for 60 seconds, Taeho translated, "then attack with everything we have." The dragons separated again, each taking a different route into the hangar bay. Taeho checked the timer on his wrist display, counting down the seconds. When the time came, all 3 dragons attacked simultaneously from different directions. The guards had been expecting another frontal assault, not a coordinated strike from 3 different angles. The Golden Dragon targeted the barrier generator, overloading it with electrical pulses until it exploded. The Silver Dragon charged the heavy weapons positions, using its armored scales to absorb their fire while destroying the weapons themselves. The Red Dragon went after the command post where the guards were trying to coordinate their defense. Taeho, Sojin, and Wubin followed behind the dragons, securing equipment and making sure no guards could regroup for a counterattack. The battle was over in less than 5 minutes. "There." Sojin pointed toward a group of small ships at the far end of the hangar. "Those look like they could carry all of us." But as they approached the ships, new alarms began sounding. These were different from the prison alerts they had heard before. These were military combat alarms. "What now?" Wubin asked. Through the hangar's large windows they could see other ships approaching, human ships with the markings of Earth's Deep Space Rescue Service. "Captain Ryu Ji-hoon," Taeho breathed, recognizing the lead ship's identification codes. "They came looking for us." The Red Dragon made sounds that seemed like questions. It was asking about the approaching vessels. "Friends," Taeho explained. "Human friends who came to help us." But even as relief flooded through him, Tejo realized their escape was not over yet. The approaching rescue ships were heavily outnumbered by the Kethmori fleet, and somewhere on this chaotic vessel, Vextar was probably planning one final, desperate attempt to maintain control. The real battle was just beginning. Captain Ryu Ji-hoon's voice came through the communication system as his rescue ships engaged the Kethmori fleet outside. "This is Earth Rescue Command to any human survivors on the prison vessel. We are here to get you out. Respond if you can. Hear this message." So-jin quickly activated the hangar's communication system. "Captain Ryu, this is Engineer Park So-jin. We are in Hangar Bay 7 with Dr. Lee Tae-ho and Soldier Kim Woo-bin. We are alive and ready for extraction." "So-jin," came the captain's relieved voice. "Thank the stars you made it. We tracked your ship's emergency beacon to this location. Prepare for immediate extraction. We cannot hold off their fleet for long." But even as he spoke, the situation became more complicated. Vextar's voice echoed through the hangar as the warden himself appeared on the upper observation deck, surrounded by his remaining guards. "You will not leave this ship," the alien snarled. "If I cannot keep you as prisoners, then you will die. Here." Behind him, guards were wheeling in the largest weapon Tejo had seen yet. It looked like a cannon designed to destroy entire ships from the inside. "Dragon Killer," Vextar announced with satisfaction. "Designed specifically to penetrate dragon scales and destroy their internal organs. One shot will kill all three of your new friends, and the explosion will destroy most of this hangar." The three dragons moved protectively in front of their human allies. The red dragon spread its wings wide, trying to shield the others. But the weapon was too large and too powerful to be stopped by physical barriers. 60 seconds to charge," one of the guards reported. Tejo's mind raced. They had come so far, survived so much. The dragons had trusted him, and now they were all going to die because of his decision to escape. But then he remembered something. The dragons were not just intelligent. They were strategic thinkers who had been planning for years. They would not have revealed their abilities unless they had a way to deal with the worst threats. The red dragon made urgent sounds to its companions. The golden dragon responded immediately, moving to a control panel near the wall. The silver dragon took position near the hangar's main doors. "They have another plan," Tejo realized. The golden dragon placed all four of its claws on the control panel and began to glow with electrical energy. But this time, instead of disabling systems, it seemed to be channeling power into them. "What is it doing?" So-jin asked. The answer came when every light in the hangar suddenly became blazingly bright. Power from all over the ship was being redirected to this one location. The dragon was turning the entire hangar into a massive electrical weapon. 40 seconds to fire," the guard with the dragon killer reported. The silver dragon moved to the hangar doors and began tearing at the massive metal barriers that sealed them shut. Its claws ripped through steel like paper, creating openings that led directly to the vacuum of space. "It is going to decompress the hangar," Woo-bin understood. "Everyone will be sucked out into space." But the red dragon made reassuring sounds and gestured toward the small ships they had been planning to use for escape. The message was clear. They needed to get to the ships before the decompression began. 20 seconds, Tejo called out as they ran toward the nearest vessel. "Everyone inside now." The dragons followed them into the ship, barely fitting through the cargo doors. So-jin threw herself into the pilot's seat and began the startup sequence with desperate speed. 10 seconds to weapon discharge, the guard above announced. 5 seconds to decompression, Woo-bin countered, watching the silver dragon's progress on the hangar doors. Everything happened at once. The dragon killer fired its massive energy beam just as the silver dragon tore away the last section of the hangar door. The sudden decompression sucked everything not bolted down toward the opening, including Vextar and his guards. The weapon's beam went wide, missing its target as the platform it was mounted on tilted and shifted in the violent air currents. So-jin engaged the ship's engines and shot through the torn opening into space, just as the Golden Dragon's electrical overload caused explosions throughout the prison vessel. Behind them, the massive alien ship began to break apart as its power systems failed and secondary explosions tore through its hull. Vextar's final attempt at revenge had instead caused the destruction of his own vessel. Captain Ryu's ships moved in to provide escort, as Tae-ho's group flew clear of the disaster. "Outstanding work," the captain's voice came through their communication system. "How did you manage to escape and destroy an entire Kethmori prison ship?" Tae-ho looked at the 3 dragons who were crammed into the cargo area but seemed pleased with their success. "We had help from some very intelligent friends." "Friends?" Captain Ryu asked. "It is a long story," So-jin said. "But we are not the only ones who need extraction. There are other escaped prisoners in small ships throughout this area, and we have 3 dragons who need safe transport to a world where they can be free." There was silence on the communication channel for several moments. "Dragons," Captain Ryu finally said. "Real dragons." "Very real," Tae-ho confirmed, "and very intelligent. They are not animals or weapons. They are a species that deserves respect and protection." The red dragon moved as close to the communication system as it could manage and made a series of sounds. Tae-ho listened carefully to the rhythm and tone. "It is saying thank you," he translated. "Not just for the rescue, but for treating them as equals instead of beasts." Over the next hour, Captain Ryu's ships collected escape pods and small vessels carrying dozens of freed prisoners from different species. The prison break had been more successful than anyone had imagined. Hundreds of beings who had been held captive were now free. But for Tae-ho, the most important success was the 3 dragons who had trusted him with their freedom. As their ship flew toward the human fleet's medical vessel, he sat with his back against the red dragon's warm scales and thought about what had happened. The aliens had thrown him into the dragon pit, expecting him to die for their entertainment. Instead, he had found the beginning of something that could change the galaxy. The dragons had been waiting for someone who would see them as they truly were. Not beasts to be controlled or weapons to be used, but intelligent beings with their own thoughts, feelings, and dreams of freedom. "What happens now?" So-jin asked as they approached the medical ship. The golden dragon made soft sounds and gestured toward the stars with its snout. The meaning seemed clear. "They want to find their people," Tae-ho said. "There are other dragons out there, probably enslaved on other worlds. Now that they know humans can be trusted, they want to build an alliance to free them all." The silver dragon moved closer and made its own sounds, looking directly at Tae-ho. "And they want us to help them," he added. Woo-bin smiled despite his injuries. "Sounds like our work is just beginning." As their ship docked with the medical vessel, Tae-ho reflected on how much everything had changed. A week ago, he had been a scientist studying ancient dragon bones and cave paintings. Now he was part of an alliance between humans and living dragons that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The red dragon made gentle sounds as the docking process completed. Through the viewport, Tae-ho could see human medical teams, waiting to help the rescued prisoners. But he also saw something that made him smile. Captain Ryu had prepared a special cargo bay with high ceilings and warm lighting specifically for the dragons. "They knew we were bringing you," he told the red dragon. "Humans are good at adapting to new situations." The medical teams were amazed when they saw the dragons, but they followed their training and treated them with professional respect. Dr. Sarah Chen, the chief medical officer, examined each dragon carefully to make sure they had not been seriously injured during their captivity. "Their vital signs are strong," she reported to Tae-ho, "but there are signs of long-term stress and malnutrition. These creatures have been suffering for years." The dragons allowed themselves to be examined because they trusted Tae-ho's assurance that the humans wanted to help them. But Tae-ho could see the intelligence in their eyes as they studied everything around them, learning about human technology and behavior. Captain Ryu joined them in the cargo bay, moving slowly and keeping his hands visible to show he was not a threat. The red dragon watched him carefully but did not seem hostile. "Dr. Lee," the captain said, "I need to understand what happened down there. My reports will determine how Earth Command responds to this situation." Tae-ho spent the next hour explaining everything: how the dragons had been enslaved and tortured, how they had recognized his respect for their intelligence, how they had planned and executed a coordinated escape that freed hundreds of prisoners. "The important thing," he emphasized, "is that they chose to trust us. Dragons have been hunted and enslaved by other species for generations. Our chance to build a real alliance with them depends on proving that humans are different. The golden dragon approached Captain Ryu and made questioning sounds while looking at his uniform insignia. It seemed to be asking about his rank and authority. It wants to know if you have the power to make decisions for humans, Teho translated. Captain, Ryu nodded slowly. I can speak for Earth Command on matters of first contact and rescue operations. What does it want to know? The golden dragon made a series of complex sounds. The red and silver dragons added their